The coffee machine was hissing, spitting its last bitter drops into the glass pot when I saw the screen. $14.12. Yesterday, there had been 280,000. There was no dramatic music, no sudden gasp, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the creeping, cold realization that my only son had finally bled me dry. The morning it happened tasted like stale toast and burnt grounds. It was a Tuesday. I remember the specific drag of the humidity outside, the way the damp air clung to the screen door of the kitchen. My knees popped as I sat down at the small oak table. It's an old table. You can still feel the shallow grooves near the edge where Leo used to press too hard with his ballpoint pens when doing his math homework 20 years ago. I opened my laptop. The hinge gave that familiar, cheap, plastic crackle. I only ever used the thing to check the weather, pay the utility bills, and look at my bank balance. I was retired 35 years managing a lumber yard, and my finances were a quiet, predictable pond. My pension dropped in on the first of the month. My savings, sitting in a linked account, formed the bedrock of my old age. I typed in my password. The loading wheel spun, a tiny blue circle stuttering on the smudged screen. When the page resolved, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Total available balance, $14.12. I blinked. I rubbed my thumb over my dry lips, feeling a piece of chapped skin catch. I refreshed the page. The screen went white, then rebuilt itself. Total available balance, $14.12. My checking account was near empty. My savings account, the one holding the bulk of my liquid assets, the nest egg meant to keep me out of a state-run nursing home, was sitting at absolute zero. A heavy, physical stillness settled over me. It wasn't panic. Panic is sharp and hot. This was a dull, leaden weight dropping straight into my bowels. I clicked on the transaction history. The screen lagged, testing my patience, before producing a single, clean line of text, dated the previous afternoon. Wire transfer. Outbound. -$282,400. Authorized. L. Henderson. Leo. My chest tightened, a mechanical constriction like a band of iron ratcheting down over my ribs. Leo was on the account. I had put him on it 3 years ago, right after my wife Martha died. The grief had made me pragmatic, maybe a little morbid. I didn't want him dealing with probate court or frozen assets if I suddenly had a stroke and dropped dead in the hallway. I told him it was for emergencies. I told him it was his inheritance. Eventually. But for now, it was my safety net. I picked up my phone. The screen was cracked in the corner. I dialed his number. It rang once, twice, then dumped me into his voicemail. "Hey, it's Leo. Leave a message, or don't. Text me." I hung up. I didn't leave a message. What do you say to a machine? Call me back, you stole my life. I stood up. The kitchen suddenly felt too small. The air thick and difficult to breathe. The smell of the burnt coffee was suddenly nauseating. I poured the pot down the stainless steel sink, watching the brown liquid swirl into the dark hole of the drain, listening to the wet gurgle of the pipes. I grabbed my keys. The metal felt cold and heavy in my palm. The drive to the local bank branch took 14 minutes. I didn't turn on the radio. The tires hummed over the cracked asphalt of County Road 9. The air conditioning in my truck blew a weak, dusty breeze against my face, smelling faintly of old mildew and dried pine needles. I walked into the bank. It was quiet. The carpet was that institutional blue designed to hide dirt, and the air smelled heavily of lemon, pledge, and ozone. I bypassed the teller line and walked straight toward the glass-walled offices in the back. David, the branch manager, looked up from his desk. He was a younger guy, mid-30s, always wearing a tie clip that looked a little too shiny. He saw my face, and his professional smile faltered. "Frank," he said, standing up, "everything all right?" "I need you to look at my account, David," I said. My voice sounded weird, flat, unattached to my body. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. I sat. The fake leather squeaked under my weight. He tapped his keyboard, his eyes scanning his dual monitors. I watched the reflection of the screen in his glasses. I watched his eyebrows inch upward. He stopped typing. The silence in the small office stretched, broken only by the muted clack-clack of a teller's machine out in the lobby. "Frank," David started, his voice dropping a register, adopting the tone you use when talking to a man standing on a ledge. "There was a wire transfer initiated yesterday afternoon. Large sum. It cleared." "Who initiated it?" I asked, though I already knew. "Leo," David said softly. "He came into the branch downtown. He presented his ID. He's a joint owner on the account, Frank. He has full authorization. He took everything." David swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed over his tight collar. "Frank, did he not discuss this with you?" "No, I can. We can look into fraud protocols. But Frank, legally, the money is as much his as it is yours. The way the mandate is structured. If he authorized it in person." David trailed off, looking miserable. He was a banker, not a priest. But right now, he was hearing a confession of profound foolishness. My foolishness. "Can you track where it went?" I asked, staring at a small, dead spider curled up in the corner of David's windowsill. "It went to a title company, Frank," David said gently. "A real estate holding firm, and a catering vendor. It looks like, well, I shouldn't speculate." I didn't need him to. Leo was getting married in 3 weeks to Chloe. Chloe, who looked at my house like it was a quaint, dirty museum. Chloe, who had loudly complained that her father wasn't paying for the wedding because he thought Leo was a deadbeat. "Right," I said. I placed my hands on my knees and pushed myself up. My joints ached. I felt incredibly old. "Thank you, David." "Frank, wait, please, sit down. Let me call our legal department. Let's just see." "There's nothing to see," I said, turning away. "He's on the signature card." I walked out of the bank. The automatic sliding doors parted with a soft whoosh, and the mid-morning heat hit me in the face like a wet towel. I stood on the concrete sidewalk, the glare of the sun making me squint. I had $14 to my name. I had a truck with a quarter tank of gas, and I had a house. At least, I thought I did. The drive back home was a blur. My mind wasn't racing. It was stalled, spinning its tires in deep mud. I kept trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe Leo was in trouble. Maybe he owed money to bad people. I would have given it to him if he'd asked. I would have been angry. I would have yelled. But I would have given it to him. You don't sneak into the vault unless you're trying to hide the theft from the guard. I pulled onto my street. It's a quiet cul-de-sac lined with mature oak trees. The roots have buckled the sidewalks over the decades, pushing up the concrete in jagged little steps. I bought the house with Martha in 1988. I put up the drywall in the basement myself. I replaced the water heater twice. The smell of the damp earth in the backyard after a summer rain was woven into my DNA. As I rounded the curve, I slowed down. There was a silver Lexus SUV parked in my driveway. It was gleaming, freshly washed, sitting entirely out of place next to my rusted mailbox. A woman was standing on my front porch. She was wearing a sharp navy blazer, beige slacks, and held a thick leather binder against her chest. She was examining the brickwork near the front door. Another person, a man in a polo shirt holding a laser measuring tape, was walking the perimeter of my front lawn, pointing a red dot at the corners of the property. I pulled my truck to the curb, killed the engine, and stepped out. The door slammed with a heavy, metallic crunch. The woman on the porch turned. She had perfectly highlighted hair and a bright, practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, hi," she called out, stepping down the brick stairs. Her heels clicked sharply against the concrete. "You must be the neighbor. I'm Brenda, with Oak and Keys Realty." I stopped at the edge of the driveway. The gravel crunched under my boots. "I'm not the neighbor. I'm Frank Henderson. I live here." Brenda's smile froze, then melted into an expression of polite confusion. She looked down at her binder, flipping a page. "Frank Henderson? I'm sorry, there must be some confusion. The seller is a Leo Henderson. I'm here to do the final pre-closing walkthrough. The buyers are flying in tomorrow. The hot summer air suddenly felt freezing. The hairs on my arms stood up. I tasted copper in the back of my mouth. The seller, I repeated. The words felt like stones in my mouth. Yes, Brenda said, her voice dropping, sensing the sudden volatile shift in the atmosphere. Leo Henderson. We've been under contract for 3 weeks. Cash offer. Very quick close. This is my house, I said. My voice was dangerously quiet. My name is on the deed. Brenda took a step back, her professional demeanor cracking. She pulled out her phone. Mr. Henderson, I have the title report right here. The property was transferred. Leo Henderson holds the deed, and he has a full power of attorney on file. He signed the listing agreement. Power of attorney. The memory hit me with physical force, making me sway slightly on my feet. 2 years ago, I had a mild ischemic attack, a mini stroke. I woke up in a hospital bed, the right side of my face feeling like it was packed with cotton, my vision swimming. Leo had been sitting in the plastic chair next to the bed, holding a clipboard. He had looked so worried, so devoted. Dad, you scared the hell out of me, he had said, his voice cracking. The doctors say you'll be fine, but we need to be smart. I talked to a lawyer. You need to sign this POA so I can handle the hospital billing, the insurance, and the house payments if you're stuck in here for a while. Just to keep the lights on, Dad. I'll take care of everything. I was weak. I was terrified of dying in that sterile room smelling of bleach and old pudding. I trusted my son. I signed the papers with a shaky, uncoordinated hand. He never revoked it. He held onto it like a loaded gun, waiting for the right moment to pull the trigger. He sold it, I whispered. I looked past Brenda, at the front window of the living room. The curtains Martha had sewn were still hanging there. He sold the house from under me. The man with the laser pointer stopped walking and looked over, sensing the tension. Brenda clutched her binder tighter. Mr. Henderson, I am so sorry. I had no idea. He told us you were moving into an assisted living facility. He said the house was empty. Empty, I echoed. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling, thick, calloused hands that had worked for 40 years to pay off the mortgage on the dirt we were standing on. I need you to leave, I said, looking up at Brenda. Sir, the closing is in 2 days. The buyers. I don't care about the buyers. My voice cracked like a whip, startling even me. It wasn't a yell. It was a guttural bark, scraping, tearing out of my throat. Get off my property. Now. Brenda didn't argue. She signaled the man with the laser, practically jogged to her Lexus, and sped out of the cul-de-sac, leaving a faint cloud of exhaust hanging in the humid air. I stood in the driveway for a long time. The neighborhood was dead quiet. A lawnmower hummed a few streets over. A crow cawed from the oak tree. I walked up to the front door, put my key in the lock, and turned it. The deadbolt slid back with a heavy, final thud. I walked inside. The house smelled like it always did, pine cleaner, old paperbacks, and the faint, lingering scent of the cinnamon candles Martha used to burn in the winters. I walked into the living room and sat down in my recliner. The fabric gave way perfectly to the shape of my body. I didn't cry. I sat there for 3 hours, watching the dust motes dance in the slanting afternoon light. I was trying to locate the boy I had raised, the kid who used to ride his bike down the driveway, the teenager who begged me to teach him how to drive stick shift in the old Ford. I tried to map that boy onto the man who had just erased my existence with the stroke of a pen. They didn't match. The boy was dead. The man who replaced him was a stranger, and I needed to go see that stranger. The Oak Ridge Country Club sat on a sprawling hill on the north side of town, surrounded by manicured golf greens that looked too perfect to be real, like astroturf rolled out over the earth. It was a place designed to make you feel small if you didn't belong. I pulled my old Ford truck into the sweeping circular driveway at 7 o'clock that evening. The sun was beginning to set, casting long golden shadows across the pristine pavement. A valet in a crisp white shirt and a black vest stepped forward, his smile faltering as he took in the rusted wheel wells and the cracked windshield of my truck. "Evening, sir," the valet said, his tone polite but guarded. Private event tonight. I know, I said, handing him the keys. The metal ring clinked loudly in the quiet evening air. I'm the father of the groom. I didn't change clothes. I was still wearing my faded denim jeans, heavy work boots, and a plain gray t-shirt. I could feel the sweat drying on my back. I walked past the massive stone pillars of the entrance and pulled open the heavy glass door. The air conditioning inside hit me instantly, cold and aggressively floral. The lobby smelled of expensive perfume, roasted rosemary, and money. To my left, a set of double mahogany doors stood open, leading into the main banquet hall. I heard the soft, sophisticated hum of conversation, the clinking of crystal glasses, and the gentle plucking of a string quartet warming up. Tonight was the rehearsal dinner, the big event before the wedding on Saturday. Chloe's family had money, but they were stingy with it. They demanded perfection, but expected others to foot the bill. Leo, eager to please a woman who treated him like an accessory, had clearly found a way to become the big spender. I walked toward the open doors. No one stopped me. I stepped into the room. It was stunning, I had to admit. Long tables draped in heavy white linen, enormous centerpieces of white lilies and orchids exploding from tall glass vases, waiters in black ties gliding effortlessly across the parquet floor, carrying silver trays of champagne flutes. I stood near the entrance, a dark, rough stain on a perfectly painted canvas. People began to notice. Conversations near me tapered off. Eyes flicked over my dirty boots, my stained jeans, taking in the grim set of my jaw. Then I saw him. Leo was standing near the head table. He looked immaculate. He was wearing a custom-fitted navy suit that probably cost more than my first car. His hair was perfectly styled, and he was holding a glass of amber liquid, laughing at something a groomsman had just said. He looked completely at ease. He looked like a man who didn't have a care in the world. Beside him stood Chloe. She was wearing a sleek ivory cocktail dress, her hair pulled back into a severe, elegant knot. She was smiling, but her eyes were scanning the room, making sure everyone was paying attention to her. I started walking toward them. My boots made a heavy, rhythmic thud, thud, thud on the wooden floor. The sound cut through the polite chatter. The string quartet suddenly sounded very loud. Leo turned, his laugh fading as he saw the sea of guests parting for me. For a split second, I saw it the absolute terror in his eyes. The glass in his hand twitched. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax mannequin. But Leo had always been a fast talker, a quick adjuster. He pasted on a wide, fake smile and took a step toward me, opening his arms. "Dad," he boomed, his voice unnaturally loud, echoing in the cavernous room. "You made it! I didn't think you were coming until the wedding." He reached out to hug me. I didn't raise my arms. I just stood there, a foot away from him. He awkwardly patted my shoulder, stepping back when he realized I wasn't going to reciprocate. Chloe stepped up beside him. She looked me up and down, her lip curling ever so slightly in distaste at my clothes. "Frank, so glad you could make it. We were just telling my parents how generous you've been." "Generous," I repeated. The word tasted like ash. "Dad, let's go grab a drink," Leo said quickly, his eyes darting around the room. He reached for my elbow, his grip tight, frantic. "Let's go out to the patio, catch up." "I don't want to drink, Leo," I said. My voice was low, carrying only a few feet, but it was hard and flat as a slate stone. "I want to know where my house is." Leo swallowed. The muscles in his jaw jumped. He leaned in, his cologne thick and overpowering sandalwood and citrus. It smelled like a stranger. "Dad, please," he hissed, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "Not here. Not in front of Chloe's family. I'll explain everything. Just come outside." "Explain the $14 in my checking account," I said, not moving an inch. "Explain Brenda from the real estate agency showing up in my driveway today." Chloe's polite smile vanished. She looked at Leo, then at me. "Leo, What is he talking about? Nothing, babe. It's just a misunderstanding, Leo stammered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the heavy air conditioning. Dad's getting confused. You know how he gets. Dad, come on. He tried to pull me toward the side doors. I planted my feet. I am an old man. My knees are shot, and my back aches every morning. But I spent 35 years hauling lumber. I was heavy, and I was immovable. Leo tugged, and when I didn't budge, he looked at me, pure panic contorting his handsome face. Confused, I said, letting the word hang in the air. The room had gone dead silent. The string quartet had stopped. 100 pairs of eyes were burning into my back. I'm not confused. Leo, you took the $280,000 from my savings. You used that POA from when I was in the hospital to sign over the deed to my house. You sold the home your mother died in so you could pay for. I gestured broadly at the room, at the lilies, at the champagne. This. Chloe physically took a step back from Leo. Leo, tell me he's lying. You said your investments paid off. You said you bought out his mortgage so he could move to the coast. I did. I was going to. Leo blurted out, his facade completely shattering. He turned back to me, dropping the volume, pleading. Dad, listen to me. I had to. You don't understand the pressure. Chloe's dad wouldn't respect me if I couldn't provide. I was going to put the money back. I have a startup idea. It's going to get funded next quarter. I swear to God. I just needed liquidity. You have your pension. You can rent a nice apartment. I stared at him. I looked at the shape of his nose, the exact copy of Martha's. I looked at his eyes, the exact shade of brown as mine. I searched for a shred of remorse, a shred of the son I loved. I found nothing, just a panicked animal caught in a trap, angry that the trap was hurting him. I can rent an apartment, I said quietly. Yes, exactly. Leo seized on the lifeline, nodding rapidly. It's just money, Dad, and a house. It's too big for you anyway. We're family. Family helps each other. You've always said that. The absolute audacity of it hit me. The sheer, breathtaking entitlement. He wasn't sorry he stole my life. He was sorry I caught him before he could finish burying the body. A cold, dark clarity washed over me. The dull weight in my stomach evaporated, replaced by a sharp, icy focus. He was right. People think betrayal is a loud thing, a sudden explosion. It's not. It's the quietest thing in the world. It's the sound of a pen on a contract. It's a click of a mouse. And my response was going to be just as quiet. You're right, Leo, I said. My voice was perfectly steady. The anger was gone, locked away in a steel box in the back of my mind. Leo blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift. I am. You are. It's just a house, I said. I looked past him, locking eyes with Chloe, who looked like she was going to be sick. Then I looked back at my son. Enjoy your rehearsal dinner. I turned on my heel. I didn't wait for his response. I walked back through the parted sea of guests, my boots thudding against the floor. I walked out of the banquet hall, through the perfumed lobby, and out into the humid summer night. The valet quickly brought my truck around, looking at me warily. I climbed into the cab, the vinyl seat hot against my back. I put the truck in gear and drove away from the country club. I didn't have a plan when I woke up that morning. But as I drove back toward the house that was legally no longer mine, the gears in my head began to turn, grinding with a terrible, slow precision. Leo had used the law to destroy me. He had forgotten that I knew how to read the fine print, too. I drove home with the windows rolled down. The humid night air whipped through the cab of the truck, smelling of cut grass and hot asphalt. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached, but my mind was remarkably quiet. I parked in the driveway, right where Brenda's shiny Lexus had been hours earlier. The house was dark. I walked inside, bypassed the light switches, and navigated by the pale moonlight filtering through the kitchen blinds. I didn't go to bed. I went straight to the basement. The air down here was cooler, carrying the faint, chalky scent of concrete and old cardboard boxes. In the far corner sat a heavy olive green steel filing cabinet. I had bought it at a government surplus auction in 1992. I pulled open the top drawer. The metal track screeched, a harsh, grating sound that set my teeth on edge. 35 years managing a lumber yard teaches you a few hard truths about human nature. It teaches you that people will smile to your face while they steal the copper wiring out of your walls. It also teaches you how to protect yourself. In the lumber business, if a contractor buys materials on credit and refuses to pay, you don't send a heavy to break his kneecaps. You go to the county clerk. You file a mechanic's lien. You poison the well. You make it impossible for them to sell or refinance the property until they settle their debt with you. I pulled out a thick manila folder labeled Medical. Legal 2024. I took it upstairs to the kitchen table, flipped on the overhead light, and put on my reading glasses. The harsh yellow glare illuminated the paperwork. I found the power of attorney I had signed in the hospital. I read every single line, my index finger tracing the dense, legal jargon. There it was, page 3, paragraph 4. The agent shall act as a fiduciary, prioritizing the principal's well-being and financial stability, and shall not engage in self-dealing or the transfer of the principal's assets for the agent's sole personal benefit without explicit, separate, written consent. Leo was a fast talker, but he was lazy. He had used a standardized form printed off the internet. He hadn't bothered to hire an actual lawyer to strip out the fiduciary duty clauses. He just assumed I would die or fade away into a home, too tired and confused to fight back. I left the folder on the table. I finally went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay on my back watching the shadows of the oak tree branches crawl across the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. My chest felt hollowed out, scraped clean with a sharp spoon. I was preparing to destroy my only child. Wednesday morning, I drank a glass of tap water, skipped breakfast, and grabbed a credit card I kept in a drawer for absolute emergencies. I didn't go to the police first. The police are slow. They take reports. They pass it to a detective. They shuffle papers. I needed a grenade, and I needed it to go off today. I drove downtown to the county courthouse. The building smelled of old floor wax and anxious sweat. I took a numbered ticket and waited on a hard wooden bench for 40 minutes. When they called my number, I walked up to the thick plexiglass window. I filed a civil complaint against Leo for breach of fiduciary duty and elder financial exploitation. It cost me $250. But the complaint wasn't the weapon. The weapon was the piece of paper I filed immediately after. A lis pendens, a notice of pending litigation, attached directly to the deed of my house. The clerk, a woman with tired eyes and a thick blue cardigan, stamped the paperwork. Thwack. The sound echoed in the quiet hall. "This is recorded, Mr. Henderson," she said, sliding the copies back under the glass. "It's public record as of right now." "Thank you," I said. A lis pendens is a cloud on a title. It screams to the world that the property is under legal dispute. No title insurance company in the country will underwrite a mortgage on a house with a clouded title. No sane cash buyer will close on a property they might lose in a lawsuit. Leo's sale was dead. The quick cash he was expecting to finalize his wedding vendors tomorrow was trapped behind a wall of legal concrete. I walked out of the courthouse and drove 3 blocks down to the police precinct. I walked into the lobby, smelling of stale coffee and ozone, and asked to speak to a detective about grand larceny and elder abuse. I sat in a small, windowless interview room with a detective named Harrison. He had a graying mustache and a permanent squint. I laid out the bank statements. I laid out the POA. I explained the wire transfer to the title company and the caterers. Harrison stopped taking notes and looked up at me. "Your own son?" "My son," I said. My voice didn't waver. "Frank, if I open this case, we freeze the accounts, all of them. We contact the financial institutions, and we freeze the outbound wires. We pull the money back into escrow pending investigation." He won't have access to a dime. Do it, I said. Harrison looked at me for a long, quiet moment. He nodded slowly. All right, I'll get the magistrate on the phone. I drove home. I parked the truck. I sat on the porch, and I waited. It took exactly 26 hours for the sky to fall. Thursday afternoon. The air was thick, threatening a summer thunderstorm. The sky bruised purple in the west. I was sitting in my recliner, reading a paperback thriller I wasn't really comprehending, when the tires squealed. I looked out the window. A black sedan had jerked to a violent halt in my driveway, kicking up a spray of gravel. Leo burst out of the driver's side. He wasn't wearing his custom suit. He was wearing yesterday's slacks and a wrinkled undershirt. His hair was a chaotic mess. He sprinted up the brick steps and pounded his fist against the front door. The wood rattled in the frame. "Dad, open the door," he screamed. His voice was shrill, cracking with panic. "Dad." I set my book down. I walked to the door, unlocked the deadbolt, and pulled it open. Leo practically fell inside. He was sweating profusely. He smelled of stale alcohol, panic, and cheap deodorant. He looked at me, his eyes wide and bloodshot, completely manic. "What did you do?" he gasped, grabbing the edge of the doorframe to steady himself. "What the hell did you do?" "I protected my assets," I said. "The title company called me," he yelled, stepping toward me. "The buyers pulled out. They saw the lawsuit. They pulled the cash. And my bank. My debit card declined at the florist. Dad, I called the bank, and they said my accounts are frozen. A fraud investigation. Dad, the wedding is tomorrow." "There is no wedding, Leo," I said. The absolute finality in my tone made him freeze. "You breached your fiduciary duty. You stole from a vulnerable adult. The money is frozen. The house is locked in litigation. You don't have the cash to pay the caterer, the venue, or Chloe's expectations." Leo stared at me. His mouth opened and closed, like a fish pulled onto the dock. The manic energy drained out of him, replaced by a sudden, terrifying realization of his own ruin. "Chloe," he whispered, his hands dropping to his sides. "Her dad called me an hour ago, when the venue called them about the bounced final payment. He told me not to come back to their house. Chloe won't answer my texts." "I imagine she won't," I said. "You ruined me." The words came out as a wet, broken sob. Tears welled up in his eyes, spilling over his cheeks. He collapsed onto his knees right there in the entryway, the hardwood floor biting into his legs. "I'm your son. You ruined my life." I looked down at him. A man in his 30s, crying on the floor because he got caught stealing his father's life savings. I thought I would feel vindicated. I thought I would feel a rush of triumph. I felt nothing, just a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. "You ruined your own life, Leo," I said softly. "You looked at me, a man who gave you everything, and you saw an easy mark. You wanted to play a grown-up game. Now you have to pay the grown-up consequences." "Please," he begged, grabbing the hem of my jeans. His fingers dug into the denim. "Drop the suit. Call the cops. Tell them it was a mistake. I'll pay you back. I swear to God, Dad, I'll pay you back every cent. Just don't let me lose her. Don't let me go to jail." I reached down and gently pried his fingers off my leg. His hands were cold and clammy. "I can't stop the police, Leo. It's in their hands now," I said, "and the house isn't for sale." A pair of headlights swept across the living room wall. I looked out the open door. A black and white county cruiser was pulling up to the curb behind Leo's sedan. Detective Harrison stepped out, shutting the heavy door behind him. He looked up at the porch, his eyes landing on Leo. Leo heard the car door. He turned his head slowly. When he saw the police cruiser, a low, animalistic whine escaped his throat. He didn't run. He just sat there on the floor, shrinking into himself, getting smaller and smaller. Harrison walked up the steps. He looked at me, then down at Leo. "Leo Henderson?" Harrison asked, his voice strictly business. Leo didn't answer. He just stared at the floorboards. "I need you to step outside with me, son," Harrison said. I stepped back, out of the way. I watched as Harrison helped my son to his feet. I watched as Leo was walked down the driveway, his shoulders slumped, head hung low. He was placed in the back of the cruiser. He never looked back at the house. He never looked back at me. The cruiser pulled away, turning the corner and disappearing out of sight. I stood in the doorway for a long time. The impending thunderstorm finally broke. Heavy, fat drops of rain began to smack against the concrete of the driveway, washing away the tire marks left by Leo's car. The air instantly cooled, smelling of wet earth and ozone. I closed the front door. The deadbolt slid into place with a heavy, satisfying thud. I walked into the kitchen. I filled the glass pot with fresh water, scooped in the grounds, and turned on the coffee machine. It began to hiss and spit. I got my house back. The lawyers told me the frozen funds would be returned to my account within the month. I was safe. I wasn't going to end up on the street. I sat down at the small oak table. I ran my thumb over the shallow grooves near the edge, where a little boy had pressed too hard with his pen, struggling with his math homework. I had won. But sitting in the suffocating silence of my empty house, listening to the rain beat against the windows, I had never felt so entirely, completely alone. If this story hit you in the gut, you're not alone. Betrayal is quiet, but the fallout echoes forever. Frank stood his ground, but the cost was heartbreaking. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved because they crossed a line you couldn't ignore? Tell us your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Calm Dad Stories for more raw, real storytelling.